Welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant, where I give my in-depth analysis of all the pay-per-views that I watch in the WWE Network. Continuing on with the Night of Champions theme, I'll be reviewing the 2009 installment of Night of Champions for you here today. And kicking off the show is the unified WWE Tag Team title matchup, pitting the Legacy, Cody Rhodes and Ted DiBiase, against Chris Jericho and a mystery partner of his choosing. Now, the ironic twist of fate of part of this matchup was the fact that 1 year prior to this, at Night of Champions 2008, it was Cody Rhodes who turned on his own tag team partner, Hardcore Holly, to join up with Ted DiBiase to become the new World Tag Team Champions. So, a lot of people were predicting that maybe Cody Rhodes or Ted DiBiase would turn on the other to join up with Chris Jericho. Originally, it was supposed to be Jericho and Edge, taking on a rated Y2J, if you will, taking on the Legacy for the World Tag Team titles, but Edge was injured at a live event a couple of weeks before this, so he was left out with an injury, put on the show for a number of months. He wouldn't come back until the 2010 Royal Rumble, and Jericho was able to keep the titles, but he had to find a new partner. So a lot of people were predicting maybe it was going to be either Cody Rhodes or Ted DiBiase, and a nice logical follow-up from the year prior when Cody Rhodes turned on Hardcore Holly, with DiBiase turned on Rhodes. They were kind of teasing tension going into this pay-per-view, as it was at the Bash that Ted DiBiase almost turned babyface against Randy Orton. That really led to nothing. But with that being said, though, that was a really cool, intriguing aspect about this matchup that a lot of people didn't know who would be Jericho's new partner. A lot of people were also predicting whether it be Christian, if the ECW title match kicked off the show, and Christian loses the ECW title match and goes on to tag team with his old tag team partner, Chris Jericho. That would have been awesome. I saw some people predicting Chris Masters, who had just signed back with the WWE not too long before this. He wouldn't re-debut, I think, until the next night, actually, to be, if I recall correctly. But that would have been a cool tag team. But they ended up going with the Big Show. Now, Big Show got a nice pop when he came out, but on paper, had you told me that Big Show was going to be Jericho's partner, I would have been like, what the fuck, the Big Show? I've never been a Big Show fan. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but I mean, if I was more of a hardcore fan than I am now, given the fact that I was more of a casual fan at the time, had I been more of a hardcore fan back then, I probably would have been more disappointed that it wasn't someone like a Christian or a Chris Masters. They went with someone like a Big Show instead. Why they went with Big Show, I have no idea. Maybe Jericho lounged for Big Show to be his tag team partner, considering the fact that they are very good friends in real life. I think they live like right next to each other. I believe they're neighbors in the same neighborhood. But with that being said, though, it ended up being one of the best tag teams in years. They turned some garbage into gold in taking their tag team and running with it. Of course, they would successfully defend the belts on this show in a good match against the Legacy. And a lot of people didn't really know who to cheer for. The crowd was into the matchup. I think that kind of treated Jericho more like baby faces because they hated the Legacy more than they did Jericho and Big Show. But even so, the match was pretty non-existent. But in the long scheme of things, Jericho really ended up working for the best and to the benefit of both competitors. Jericho was coming off that hot year as a singles competitor as World Heavyweight Champion in 2008, and then going in 2009, he really didn't have much going for him. He had those great matches with Ricky Steamboat, with Rey Mysterio, but as a singles competitor, he really wasn't doing all that much in the top-tier main event storylines, and I know he wasn't going to get into the world title picture anytime soon over on SmackDown, so the next best thing was to help revitalize the tag team division by teaming up with the Big Show and having one of the best runs of his career a part of that tag team. So that was kind of historic in that aspect. The matchup was kind of, nothing, considering the fact it was a heel versus heel matchup, which rarely ever work anyway. But with that being said, though, it did mark the formation of Jericho. So up next, we had the ECW Championship matchup. Christian taking on Tommy Dreamer. In a very good matchup from these two. Two were both baby faces at the time. So once again, we go from a heel versus heel match to a face versus face matchup with Christian taking on Dreamer. Like I said, we've seen this matchup before. We knew how well they could work. They once again had a very good matchup on this show. Tommy Dreamer at this point in time really wasn't all that great in the ring. I mean, he could still very much go in the ring, but by this point he's like, why are you still here? I'm a big Tommy Dreamer fan. I was very excited when he won the ECW title back, his first WWE ECW title, that is. So I was very excited about that, but it was very apparent that he wasn't going to hold the title for very long, so it was only logical to give the title back to Christian on this show, who would run with that championship up until ECW's close in February when he dropped it to Ezekiel Jackson. And a move that still has a lot of people questioning, like, why the fuck did they do that? But that's another story for another day. Anyway, Christian losing winning back the ECW championship from Tommy Dreamer in a very good matchup. They would hug it out after the contest, and like I said before, it would kick off the long-ass reign as ECW champion for Christian. So we had the formation of Jericho. We had the start of Christian's second run with the ECW title, a very long one at that. So two monumental moments in the first two matches alone. Up next, we had the United States Championship matchup, a six-pack challenge for the U.S. title. It had the current, or then, U.S. champion Kofi Kingston involved, MVP, The Miz, Carlito, Jack Swagger, and Primo. Now, Primo took the place of the Big Show. When he came out, when he made his entrance, Primo, that is, no one gave a shit. They had just broken up Carlito and Primo. I didn't necessarily agree with it. I thought they were a great tag team. They probably did everything they could possibly do with them. They had won both the World and WWE Tag Team titles. They unified the tag titles at WrestleMania 25. I guess they ran their course, but they never really handled the feud properly. They had a one-off match in like fucking August, and they never really went back to it ever. And then both guys went nowhere. Carlito would end up getting released the following year, and Primo went on to tag team with Epico about a year or two later. But anyway, though, he was kind of a nothing addition to this matchup, as opposed to, or just kind of in addition to furthering his feud with Carlito in this contest. Jericho and MVP would also collide in this contest as well. They were recent rivals at the time. They would go on to face each other at the SummerSlam pay-per-view, MVP and Swagger, that is. The Miz was also an interesting case. He was pinning to win the U.S. Championship in order to impress Maurice, who he had a backstage confrontation with on the show. And in real life, little did I know at the time they were already dating, because I always thought they would be a great couple on TV. They never ended up going there, but they did end up getting married in real life, so that's pretty cool too. But a pretty fun matchup. Everything was very fast-paced. It only got 8 minutes, so they probably knew. I mean, for a six-pack challenge, it should have gotten more time, but I'm not surprised considering who was involved, and a lot of these people didn't really have much direction at the time. But with that being said, though, they made the most of the time that they had, for sure. I mean, there was a lot of fast-paced, exciting action, so they probably were told, look, you only got 8 minutes, so try to make the most of it. So they try to pack as much into an 8-minute match as they possibly could, and they succeeded in that respect. And had people, wondering who's going to emerge victorious. Kofi Kingston ended up coming out victorious, still your United States champion, believe it or not, despite the fact that the odds were stacked against him. So still the United States champion, Kofi Kingston. I was really hoping for MVP to not come out on top here, but I thought MVP would leave the U.S. Championship picture and then go on to... I thought the only reason why he dropped the U.S. title was so he could go on to challenge for the WWE Championship at SummerSlam against Randy Orton. They ended up going with John Cena instead, which kind of pissed me off, because even though that it is a legendary feud, depending on who you're talking to, I didn't really want to see Cena versus Orton again. I thought MVP versus Orton would have been fresh. MVP was still over as a babyface. And then after this, it really just kind of killed his character before he left the company about a year later. But even still, though, that kind of always pissed me off. Up next, Michelle McCool defending the Women's Championship against Melina. They didn't really confirm that this title match was happening at the show until a couple days beforehand. Michelle had beaten Melina for that Women's Championship at the Bash pay-per-view 1 month prior, and becoming the first ever woman to hold both the Women's and Divas title in WWE history. Not simultaneously, that wouldn't happen until the Night of Champions pay-per-view. Actually, coincidentally enough, about a year later. But nevertheless, this was just a rematch from the Bash. Melina and McCool have always worked well together. This matchup was no exception. Michelle McCool would end up coming out victorious via dirty tactics, so that kind of furthered her heel character. I mean, she was already well established a heel persona at this time. But it was a good matchup for what it was. They only got about 6 minutes, but I think Michelle McCool, there's always a lot of hate on Michelle McCool for being one of the terrible women's wrestlers of her generation, whatever. I always thought Michelle McCool was great. I'm not going to say Lay Cool is the greatest thing ever. Those guys, Lay Cool and Michelle McCool always pissed me off. But they were successful in getting heat. Maybe not the right kind of heat, but they were always, over as heels, I guess you could say, regardless of whatever way you look at it. But anyway, though, McCool and Melina having a good match on the show. McCool still your women's champion after the show. Up next for the WWE Championship, in a move that surprised a lot of people, and that the WWE title match wasn't even close to being the main event. We had 3 more matches after this. It was Randy Orton defending his WWE title against 2 of his biggest rivals, John Cena and Triple H, in a rematch from WrestleMania 24. And I'm a sucker for, acknowledging history of the past. And I was very glad that they did acknowledge that this was a matchup that happened at WrestleMania 24 and that Randy Orton had won that matchup. So Orton was kind of playing up the fact that history would repeat itself on the show, and it did. He would end up coming out victorious, still the WWE champion. Maybe I'm in the minority here. I always enjoyed the triple threat match at WrestleMania 24. I'm not going to say it was better than Edge and Taker or say that it was better than any other matchup on that show. But with that being said, though, I thought it was a very good matchup for what it was. This also would be a very good contest. Maybe went a bit longer than it should have. This matchup got 22 minutes. The main event between CM Punk and Jeff Hardy for the world title would only get about 14. So they probably could have cut it short just a little bit. But that being said, though, I enjoyed the action here between Triple H, John Cena, and Randy Orton. A lot of good chemistry between these three competitors. Legacy, predictably enough, would get themselves involved, help Randy Orton retain the WWE title in a very cool-looking spot. John Cena was trying to fight off the Legacy in that he had Cody Rhodes up on his shoulders for the attitude adjustment. Randy Orton would hit the RKO, sacrificing Cody Rhodes, picking up the victory to retain his WWE title. And the story coming out of this matchup was that the Legacy was costing Triple H, was trying to prevent Triple H from being WWE champion, leading into the Legacy versus DX feud going into SummerSlam and, the rest of 2009. But what about John Cena? I mean, they always, prevented John Cena from becoming WWE champion. That was kind of always something lost on me personally. But anyway, I thought this was a very good matchup. Randy Orton still your WWE champion. Up next, for the Divas Championship, we have Mickie James taking on the longest reigning Divas champion at the time, Maurice, for the title. I always thought this was a good feud. They helped build this up well from when Maurice was drafted to the Raw brand in April of 2009, and they carried that feud on for the next 3 months. So I really like the storytelling there. I'm not going to go and say that it was the best Divas feud of the year or in recent memory or anything like that, but they did a very nice job of building up the feud and making people want to see Mickie James be the one to finally take that title off of Maurice. So it was a good matchup for what it was. I don't think Maurice gets enough credit as being a very good in-ring worker. She wasn't the greatest, but I thought she was better than a lot of people give her credit for, and that's why I was saddened why she left the company in 2011. Not only because she was a great worker, she was just a spectacle to look at, so God bless The Miz for marrying that hot chick. But anyway, though, a good matchup for Mickie James and Maurice. Mickie James would come out victorious as the new Divas champion, becoming the second woman in history to win both the Women's Championship and the Divas Championship, right behind Michelle McCool. So a very cool moment there for Mickie James. Up next, we would have the Intercontinental Championship matchup between Dolph Ziggler and Rey Mysterio. Now, I really saw this as the breakout, not moment, but more breakout feud, so to speak, for Dolph Ziggler, who had been introducing to himself, to various people within the first few months that he was with the company from September of 2008. He really did nothing when he was on Raw, but it was when he was drafted to SmackDown that WWE really started to get the ball rolling with Dolph Ziggler and pushing him towards the Intercontinental Championship, having a great match with Rey Mysterio, a really breakout performance, and they would have another great match at SummerSlam, and hopefully when I review that show, I'll be able to talk about that, but Dolph Ziggler, a real breakout performance for him on the show against Rey Mysterio, the former World Heavyweight Champion. He would come this close to winning the World Heavyweight title against Rey Mysterio, but Rey Mysterio had just won back the IC title from Jericho at the Bash, so it was still too soon to take the title off of him. I always thought this feud was building towards Dolph Ziggler winning the IC title against Mysterio. That would not end up being the case, actually. He would lose to Mysterio on this show. At SummerSlam, he would lose to John Morrison a bunch of times in the remainder of the year. It wasn't until August of 2010, so it wasn't until a year later that Dolph Ziggler would finally win the Intercontinental Championship. So, that being said, though, I really enjoyed this matchup. Dolph Ziggler was finally seen in a new light as a real threat to that title. I had always read that there was a rumor going around at the time that Ziggler was rumored to win the title on the show, but it was Rey Mysterio who changed the decision and said that I want to win the title, or I want to retain the title. I don't want to lose it, or something along those lines. That kind of pissed me off. I believed it. I didn't really take it with a grain of salt. I don't know how true that is. Maybe Ziggler was supposed to win the title on the show, but like I said, they had just done so many title switches with Mysterio and Jericho going into this contest that it would have been a little soon for Ziggler to win. Maybe at SummerSlam, but definitely not on the show. But even so, that was just a rumor going around at the time. Whether that's true or not, I really have no idea. But just kind of take it with a grain of salt. Up next, the main event matchup between CM Punk and Jeff Hardy, and what I thought was the single best feud of 2009 for the World Heavyweight Championship over on the SmackDown brand. These two really helped rejuvenate SmackDown. I'm not saying SmackDown was in a bad place before this. They had a couple of good feuds going into WrestleMania 25 and in early of 2009, but they really weren't really doing much with Edge, mostly appearing on Raw and a feud with John Cena. So SmackDown was just kind of what it is now, so to speak. But SmackDown would become its own show again when they had CM Punk and Hardy feuding over the World Heavyweight title. And I don't really know if there was one moment where CM Punk turned heel. It was kind of a slow-burning thing. But his feud with Jeff Hardy was very, very good. I really enjoyed that. And watching this matchup back really brought great memories back from that feud. But another thing, too, not only would they have great chemistry on the mic and in terms of their feud, but one of the best parts about this feud was the awesome matches that they had. CM Punk and Hardy always had great matches together. And this was definitely one of the better matches that they had. And that Jeff Hardy was victorious in beating CM Punk for the World Heavyweight Championship, which came as a shock to me and many people, considering the fact, and at this point in the time, I wasn't as hardcore of a fan as I am now, but I was still aware of like the dirt sheets and some of the reports and the wrestling news websites and whatever. I had read reports that Jeff Hardy was on his way out of the company, and I thought CM Punk would retain the title here, and that'd be the end of the feud. But in a huge shocker for a lot of people, Jeff Hardy would come out victorious as the new World Heavyweight Champion with a clean win over CM Punk, setting up their TLC matchup at SummerSlam. Another great matchup from those two. But a spectacular main event from CM Punk and Jeff Hardy. They would have better matches, like I said before, in the TLC matchup and the Steel Cage matchup on SmackDown, which I also thought was very, very good. But I thought this was one of the better matches in that it built towards Jeff Hardy winning back his final World Heavyweight title in WWE. Whether he ever comes back to WWE remains a mystery, but I would always love to see Jeff Hardy back in his home of the WWE at some point, considering that's where he made his name and got famous and was one of the most over guys, as I've said time and time again in these recent WrestleRant videos, that Jeff Hardy was one of the most over guys in WWE in 08 and 09 respectively. But a great way to close out the show. I'm very glad they went off the air with this title change as opposed to Randy Orton's triple threat match, which I thought they would be going towards, since they were pushing that matchup more than they were the world title match. So I was glad they went off the air with this contest. As far as the other matches on the show, Ziggler Mysterio, a great matchup. Definitely check out that main event, as I said before. The WWE title match, I didn't think it was great, but it was a very good contest. Check it out when you get the chance. Other matches on the show, it is kind of historic in a way. We had the breakout performance from Dolph Ziggler, Jeff Hardy winning the World Heavyweight title. We had the new WWE Tag Team Champions and Chris Jericho and the Big Show, the real formation of the formation of Jericho. We would have the kickoff of the second reign as ECW champion for Christian. So this show is memorable in more ways than one. I like the 08 edition because it was solid, it had a lot of good action, but taking everything into account and on the whole, I thought this was a more memorable show. So yeah, I would say go out of your way to watch this show. It's not a spectacular show, but it was very, very enjoyable for the title changes, for the action. I thought it was a very good show. So check it out when you get the chance. And the 2010 edition, I'm very excited to review. So make sure to check back in a few more days to check out my review of the 2010 installment of Night of Champions here on the channel for WrestleRant. But with all that being said, thanks for watching, guys. Always appreciate it. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe as always. All support is greatly appreciated. I'm Graham Juice Matthews, and I'll catch you guys next week.